Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through CWM, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Carson Partners, a division of CWM, LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors. This is The Way to Wealth, with host Scott Ford, a jiu-jitsu fighting, woodworking, beekeeping entrepreneur who is also the managing director, partner, and wealth advisor of Carson Wealth. Financial freedom is the goal, and clarity and simplicity is how we'll get there. Let's get to it. This is Way to Wealth.
Hello, and welcome back to the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple, allowing you the freedom to focus on what's most important in your life and to do that now instead of 30 years from now. Super excited this week to have Ben Falk with me on the podcast. So hello and welcome to the Way to Wealth podcast, Ben.
Good to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Excited and looking forward to this. Ben and I spoke. It's going to go back. Angie and I purchased this property in West Virginia. And right before this, I started getting into permaculture a little bit. We started keeping bees a couple years before that. So probably like 2012 or to 11, something like that. And in my due diligence, I came across this book and a lot of cool YouTube videos from a guy named Ben Falk. And so we connected back then on working on a design here and have stayed in contact. And then recently, Ben was out this last year to finalize some plans on our homestead here in West Virginia. So there's some backstory there. But before I jump in, Ben has an extensive background here. He developed whole systems design basically as a land-based response to biological and cultural extinction and increasing separation between people and elemental things, which has been my calling to all this. So a designer, builder, ecologist, and Ben shared a picture, which we'll share on the podcast, as a headshot of him keeping bees. So we both do that. We can maybe chat about that a bit. And Ben holds a master's degree in land use planning and design. And he's conducted more than 550 site development and land inspection consultations across the U.S. and abroad, including our homestead in West Virginia. And as I mentioned, his book, this goes back to 2013, I believe, The Resilient Farm and Homestead, which I still have and have marked up and may certainly speak to or about this a little bit today on the podcast. So again, welcome to the Way to Wealth, Ben. Good to see you and look forward to chatting and sharing some of the things I've learned from you. And I'm sure there's plenty that you'll have that I haven't learned yet that maybe we can share with the audience, but looking forward to it. If you would, maybe just a little backstory, Ben, on why you got into this space, what brought you to this space, and basically up to where we're at today, and what you're up to.
Sure thing. I mean, I guess it depends how deep I want to go back, but when I think about that question, it's really has to do with being outside for me a lot, being close to, as my bio says, elemental things. I mean, spending my days as much as I can in the outdoors, building stuff, making things, fixing things, working with plants, being in the woods, in the rivers and the mountains, all of the things, where I live. I'm in central Vermont here in the hills, and just being part of the natural cycle of things, sitting outside on a beautiful day like this. So I guess how to make a living, how to get by in our society where you need money, at least some, was really the crux. And, so I guess finding ecological design allowed me to find a livelihood that could be done outside to a large extent and in contact with these elemental things, and also making a difference in a good way, solving problems that need to be solved. That's probably the long short of it.
Yeah. It makes sense. Good. Thanks for sharing. And, initially Ben's like, well, Scott, what do you want me to talk about on your podcast? It's a wealth podcast. And I said, well, it is. And the focus of the podcast is really health, wealth, wisdom, and happiness. And, part of wealth is you need resources. And it all ties together, health ties to it. having a sense of contribution or a dream that you're contributing to, or you feel like you're making a difference in the world. I know that's important to you. And so, with that, I would start with the question, Ben, of how would you define wealth? I mean, what is your definition of wealth?
No, it's not a question I've thought about much, but when I saw you put it on the intake form there, I think what I came to thinking about right off anyway was the means to do what I'm compelled to do, with my time. And I guess owning my time might be the simplest way I can think of wealth. Obviously, wealth, takes on a lot of like material connotations, today and in the society I live in, but all of that, matters. Any of that matters to me, and all of it does, most in terms of how it allows me to spend my time, doing what I want to do with my time, and just owning that time and not giving it away to, this company or that business or this boss or that, whoever it is that I'm, working for. So I think working for myself always seemed like kind of the only way I wanted to go. And I just have come to feel, and I think have always felt strongly this way, but more so every year really, is that my time's my most valuable thing. And I'll never get that last minute we just spent now. I won't get that back. And yesterday and last month. And so I guess place a lot of value on how I spend my time, and I really want to be able to spend it as I find most compelling, to be healthy, to contribute, to be with my family, to do things that are, just the most important to me. And so, yeah, wealth I see as a means to be able to do that, whether it's, for some people it might be a lot of resources. Some people, the people I know who are most owning of their time, who really have the most time and are most directive of their time. I was thinking about this yesterday. Most of them, if not all of them that I can think of, the people I know who really can do most days what they generally want to be doing, don't have they're not wealthy by most standards, but to me, they're actually very wealthy because they have the ability. And then I think of all a lot of friends who I went to college, not so much college, but high school with, went to make a lot of money, and they did become wealthy people, and they still are working very hard, and they have, a lot more resources than the other category of folks I mentioned. And they may like their work, but I think if they could, they'd quit if they weren't trying to make more wealth. And so I find that really interesting. And there's obviously a easy trap to get into, and especially in our society, about all that. But it's a big topic.
It's well said, man. It is a big topic, but I think he was very clear. That's well said. I've been my experience, but done this my entire life, starting in 91. So I've seen it. I got caught up in it partly as well. And it's like absolutely all of our most valuable asset is our time. And ideally, can we all get to that spot of transition that we all are going to get to, where we can look back and say, I'm glad I did versus I wish I would have, and really live life by design instead of by default. And that those words can be so shallow, yet they're so deep if you really let it sink in, because I believe, and I've been guilty of this as well, it's so easy to get caught up in living someone else's priorities, whether it's your parents, your siblings, your peers, your boss, whatever. And you don't even recognize you're doing it. And then to me, almost everything I focused on deeply for the last, let's call it decade, since I've taken time to focus on this, is space and margin. Having the space and margin in our life to get clear. And if the pandemic did anything, I think it did this. It like shut things down where people were forced to be like, what am I doing? Why am I commuting an hour and a half a day one way, or et cetera, and get off that adrenaline cycle or treadmill to really focus on. What are you doing? What do you really want? And yeah, I think you nailed it, man. That time is our most valuable asset. I remember, I think I heard it from Tim Ferriss, but he talked about there was a graphic that showed based on your age, and it showed a 30-year-old and then it showed a 60-year-old. So we all fall in there somewhere. And it showed how many Super Bowls you have left. It showed how many trips to the beach you have left. It showed, and based on weeks or times. And it's like, how many presidential elections you have left. Talk about eye-opening and just how much we take for granted that time. So I think you nailed it. And I would just say two things to add. One would be, when you think of wealth, so for me, people come to us for wealth. Help me with my money. Help me be financially free or economically independent. So our goal in the way to wealth is to create enough income resources so there's cash flow so you can do what you want. So you do have the time to focus on what you want. And that's the entry level. Then real wealth to me is the next level down, which is what we call enough. So no matter what you have, if it's enough, you're wealthy. And I can compare a billionaire or someone with $1,000. And if that person with $1,000 feels like they have enough, they're more wealthy than the billionaire. And then lastly, my third definition of wealth is love. Like, to me, this whole game's about love. So what it was created for. And if you can get and recognize that, that's the ultimate true wealth in my opinion. So thinking of wealth, and because people say money's a means, money's an energy, money's a tool. You use it for exchange. So the wealth would be actual, what I said, and resources. So you're using money for food. You may use money for something that actually carries value, but it's just a means of exchange. So I think we get caught up in that. And certainly with what you've done with permaculture, you're creating resources. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on your definition of permaculture. And you can take that as deep or however you want to take it, because that may be a new word to some of my audience. But what is permaculture and why is it important? And then and this is, I'm throwing a lot at you, but how has that been tied to wealth? Because it actually is, like, you're going to exchange monies for wealth, which is actually resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've been asked, what permaculture is many times in my life, but never in the context of a conversation about wealth and, kind of in a more of a financial type of setting. And I actually think there's a good lens here in which to view permaculture. And one way to think about it is living off of, the interest versus the principle in natural systems. So I know in financial systems, we know we want to ideally never mind the principle of an account or of a resource base. We want to live off of the interest that it spins off. Now we can do that, financially, obviously, if we have a really good setup, but we can do that ecologically too. And we can actually live on solar income, live on the current production of the soil, of the water, of the air, of the living system versus mining, kind of pulling out ancient resources and kind of denuding the system in a way where we get what we need to live, but the system is degraded. The principle is less, but by us doing so. And of course, that's not a sustainable or tenable situation. So how can we live off of the interest bearing processes of nature, of natural systems? And permaculture is basically a design science focused on doing that, how to do that, whether it's, working with plants in a garden. I'm looking out at my garden right here, or I was just with my cows, how to do it with animals living on grass off of current solar income coming in from the sky, going into grass, going through to animals, going into our livelihood, whether it's meat or milk or whatever else the resources are, whether it's infrastructure and building systems. It really applies to anything, but it's a system that helps us identify patterns and processes of how those systems work, of how living systems work, because living systems inherently want to function on interest bearing and not mind principle. And they accrue value over time. They really build value up over time. Like, think about soil. It's always building unless there's some major force, usually from humans, that reverse that. Living systems are kind of always tending actually away from entropy. They're kind of negentropic and towards value accumulation. And so permaculture is just all about how do we align ourselves with those processes and participate in that as beneficial members in the system. So how are we regenerative, keystone species in our local ecosystem? That's kind of a primary question that permaculture asks, and then it has, a field of techniques and strategies and patterns all around that.
I've said this, and I'm actually working on a paper right now on it, so this is timely, that it seems to me that in our economic world, we have tried to economize nature, and what we need to be doing is naturalizing the economy. And that, I feel like, is what you're saying in your way. And so the example I'll give is this: if you think of nature, there's so much that we can learn. One is this, that it is reciprocal. So if you think of just oxygen, that's certainly one of our most important assets. Without it, you can go without water and food a lot longer. You can't go without oxygen. And so we breathe in oxygen and turn it into carbon dioxide. We expel carbon dioxide, and nature, plants, take that carbon dioxide for their fuel and they turn it into oxygen. And it's this infinity symbol of this reciprocal give-take relationship. And I think we've gotten too focused on the extracting instead of the give-take relationship. And you could apply that to the soil, of what's happened to our soil systems from just monocropping and just taking every last ounce. Since I got into beekeeping, this was back in, like I said, 2011, I went to classes and I learned a certain way. And I'm like, this actually makes sense for me and someone who's trying to get a ton of honey so they can make a bunch of money. But this isn't really making sense for the bees. And so I did my due diligence and I start finding out, oh, you know what? There is a much better way to do this where it's healthier for the bees. And guess what? You actually probably get more honey that way too, because you're focused on the bees instead of how much you can take from the bees. And so to me, that's the message, is how can we learn from nature, this reciprocal give take, and then bring that to the economy where it is that consciousness of win-win. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've made nature a subset of the economy versus the other way around. The planet is a subset of this infinite growth, cancer as the operating system, kind of mentality, endless growth, which, if endless growth, it means quantity, not just quality, which it does in GDP. We're in a suicide system, and that's what the results, are. Despite it working for some people for short periods of time, it's we can see the results, in the world at large. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have to figure out how to create an economy that's based on reciprocity, putting back just as much as we take. And they have existed. It seems like cultures that have managed to persist for not just hundreds of years but thousands of years in places did so, at least in part, often by paying very close attention to that, because they knew if they mined out their fragile resource system, they were a goner sooner than later. And I think our technology has allowed us to live to put those that cause and effect chain at bay, so we don't see it. I get in my tractor, I burn some diesel. I don't know where that diesel comes from. It's far away. The impact of that use, I don't get to see. I don't get to participate in. So, somehow we have to localize cause and effect and tighten the loop between cause and effect a lot tighter, I think, for most of us to behave in ways that are, more in accord and calibrated to how the earth functions. I don't know how that's going to go, except we'll probably keep learning hard lessons until we align ourselves with
Yeah.
how the planet happens to work.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me when I think about just lessons learned to get on this path of permaculture and doing things where you're involved, it changes everything. So from, I mentioned keeping bees, like, there's nothing like the honey that you get from bees that you've managed and taken care of as a keeper, and then extracted that honey, and your hands have been in the process from start to finish. There's nothing like going out back in our garden and pulling lettuce and strawberries straight from the garden that goes into the bowl that I then eat that night. There's nothing like hunting a white-tailed deer on the property that you take with a bow, that then you respect. I think all of this can be done in a sacred manner where you can actually, smudge that animal and show it all the respect that you've taken a life, and then you age it, and then you process it yourself the whole way down to the bones that you then give to the chickens, that they pick every last piece off of it. In other words, you're respecting everything. Then you're taking the hide and you're doing something with it. And I'm not telling everyone to do this. This is just been my experience. It's a game changer. And then the actual, have family and friends that you share that venison with. It's unbelievable, the taste. I just think it really deepens the whole experience. I think it makes it more spiritual. I think it connects you to where nature and where we came from. And there's just something to that we need to get back to, I think, in all facets, including our monetary system and our economic structure and what wealth really is. Mm-hmm. So, I guess that I'll let you jam on that a little bit. I was going to, pick a little bit and just say, so that's it. If you can solve that, Ben, I think we'll count this podcast. We'll count it good.
I wish I could. There's been so many great thinkers, trying to figure that out. And I was compelled by these same ideas and these same questions from really starting about junior, senior year in high school. And then so in college, I totally focused on it, and read books like Natural Capitalism and Amory Lovins and Paul Hawken and all these people trying to figure out how to do it. And so far, we all thought back then, oh, these are the solutions, and none of them have panned out in a meaningful way. I mean, I'm not saying any of that's wrong, but it hasn't really, it hasn't caught on enough to make a huge difference yet. And we're still in this growth or die template, globally. And so I don't know, it's a pretty grim situation. At the same time, like you're describing, when we as individual people and families and small groups of people go and connect with living systems and participate, then we see where the power really is. And I think we do experience a lot of, life-changing encounters when we do that, and it does change our relationship. It starts to put us in relationship with the world around us in a more beneficial way, because we're able to be more responsible when we do take stock of our own resources locally and try to localize however it is we can. So I guess I keep coming back to just the more we can localize ourselves and be an example to others and how to do that, and also help others share what we learn, so that ideally everyone can live a more locally resilient lifestyle within their community. We can think, I mean, it's cliche to think globally and act locally, but in a lot of ways we really only need to think locally. I mean, if we just think, how can I improve this place around me? If we all do that, the globe is taken care of. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things getting in the way of a lot of people having the time to do that and the know-how. But if it was an important priority, we know how to do it. It takes no new technology. That's the thing. These problems, they could have been never created, really. I mean, we don't need any new inventions to solve this problem, even though most of the focus is on new inventions. There's that suicide economy for you. But we know how to do it. We know how to do it, and we just have to engage with it. And the engaging with it is where it's also very enjoyable and fun. I mean, it's not fun to just protest, hey, that's bad, that's wrong, right? It's what I used to do a lot, and write letters to senators. Like, you need to do this differently. And I'm not saying those systems don't need to change; they do. But ultimately, if we're not changing ourselves, who are we to tell other people to change? That was one of the big realizations of Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, who wrote the Permaculture Designer's Manual. They were saying, how can I protest a war if I'm dependent on on war and warlike processes in the economy to go get resources that I use? I'm funding it. I'm funding it with one hand and fighting it with the other. So permaculture is about, taking stock from the home level. Take care of the home first. Get your home in order is what Bill Mollison said, and then you can start telling other people how to get in order. But don't do it until your home's in order. We say in our permaculture design course, show me your zone 1. Zone 1's the area right around your house. Like, your truth and your vision for the world should be manifest in zone 1. If your zone 1 is a pile of trash, or your cars in the sun versus a garden, or whatever it is, that speaks to one's priority. And we all have the ability, maybe not all of us all the time, but most of us most of the time, to improve zone 1 at least a little bit, even if it's a balcony, to put a potted plant there, to add some value and some beauty. And that ripples out and starts changing ourselves and changes the world too.
That's interesting on so many fronts. One of which, just thinking, a lot of people that listen to this are like me in that they're business owners or entrepreneurs, and that would be you. You've been independent, which basically means we're not employable, is what I've always said. We would never work. That's all that means. So it is what it is, and yet it's that I, we, all model that I learned years ago. It's like, if you want to change something, it all starts within. It's like you got to get healthy first and focus on healing yourself. And then you can go to your family, and then you can go to community and more of the world. What that makes me think of, though, is like you were talking about protests and different causes that may be good. But if you're not, like, if you're showing up because it's not okay and you got to change it, well, that just means you're not okay. You're not good. If you can show up where you're good and there's something to make better, like, that's where it's at. And it feels like, and I get caught up in this still. It's like you see these things that you want to change, and, how do we naturalize the economy? And it's like, it doesn't have to be super grandiose. It can be what we're doing here on our 145 acres. It can be hands in the soil and keeping bees and hunting on the land. And you've been here, you can see, like, since we've gotten this property, and it has changed the animals. I believe that some of this may sound a little bit out there, but I live it. I'm telling you, we had geese right by the door the other day, turkeys right up front, deer at the same time. We got mergansers that are in the pond that are breeding, and they're going to have babies. I mean, it's like, it's the land is just the animals, and it's on fire. You saw some of the places that the previous owner had clear cut is just sprouting with all kinds of new life. And it's like, so this is my takeaway. This has been my thing I've been thinking about. If we show up in all areas on how we can give versus how we can get and extract, everything seems to fall in place. So if I'm a business owner, which I am, show up with, how can I serve? How can I create this product or this offering or this value that is so freaking valuable? It's going to change the people's lives that engage with me. All the other pieces fall in place. And I think it was Michael Singer that said it like this, that I like to repeat because it really resonated with me. And it's become part of my life purpose. Every moment presents itself for you to lift it. So everything happens for all these years that everything's been in existence. At that moment that puts itself in front of you is presented so you can make it better. You can lift it. And if you're not okay, how are you going to lift it? If you can show up whole and complete and okay, then the clarity can show up. Here's how I can lift it. And it doesn't have to be any huge, grandiose plant. Just like you said, it could be a pot or a plant or a tree right out your back door or doorstep. So that's really interesting thought.
Yeah, it does really start. It starts within. I couldn't agree more. We call that zone zero, and permaculture is zone zero. The self and the landscape are part of a gradient. It's a continuum. There's no boundary. So, no hard and fast boundary. So, whereas I was talking about zone one, which is what I'm in right now, that's the area, the outside area immediately outside your home. Zone zero is the inside of the home, and then zone 00 is yourself. That's the place you occupy all the time. Well, hopefully you occupy all the time, but it's where you are the whole time. And zone one, maybe you're out in zone one often, and then zone two less, and zone four is maybe go hunting there, just walking, foraging a few times a year. So but it's all a continuum, and they all affect each other.
Makes so much sense to me. Yeah. And still so much to learn. I was going to ask you, and I was actually just asked this last week, so it's just interesting how things happen, but are you familiar with Sadhguru, that name?
I feel like I've heard heard of him. Is it he?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I was asked that exact question a week ago almost. And I said, interestingly enough, if you asked me that 3 days ago, the answer was no. 2 days ago, he popped up on my YouTube feed. So I watched it and I was like, that's interesting.
Is that an Indian teacher? Or? Okay.
Yeah. Then he was on Joe Rogan's podcast the next day.
Okay.
And then the third day, this guy asked me if I know of him. And so he's on this mission of healing and healing the planet by healing the soil. His whole focus on healing is the soil. And he's got a lot of reasons for it, of how that takes care of so many of the other things that we're trying to work on if we just were to focus on healing the soil. And it's a global issue for every nation and country, is their soil.
Absolutely. Yeah. A way we can build soil, and we can build soil very rapidly through agroforestry and silvopasture, trees and animal systems, is some of the best news, I've ever received in my life when I started learning that we can actually improve soil quite rapidly. Because there's the people like me who were educated in just kind of conventional ecology early on, it's hammered into you. It takes an inch, it takes 1,000 years to build an inch of topsoil, and you learn that, and there's a good lesson there. Like, we should be humble and try not to destroy, because it takes a long time. But that's just kind of natural background rate. But if we participate in a regenerative way with a regenerative impact, humans managing a system using animals and plants can speed that up, dozens of times. Some people like Joel Salatin and Alan Savory and many others are showing that we can do that. We could build that into topsoil in 10 years or less versus 1,000, 100x different. And that, you sit with that reality, and when you start participating and you see that, it makes you realize, well, what else can we do a lot more good around than we typically believe we can? How much more powerful are we than we tend to think we really are, to do good, not just do bad. And I think that's also that imperative of regeneration, to do good, not just do less bad, I think is one of the reasons that permaculture has become quite popular, increasingly so. And we're moving out of the sustainability, kind of conservation sustainability mindset, which really never was too attractive to most people, because it's about doing less bad versus let's do something good. Let's have a positive presence. Let's make our footprints a good thing, our impact a good thing, not just, I'm going to tiptoe around because all I can really do is destroy. So I better just kind of, ultimately with that mentality, it'd be better if you weren't alive, actually, to begin with. If you're just trying to minimize your harm, that's not a tenable, idea to be alive with.
Yeah, certainly not exciting, right? But that makes complete sense. And you went actually where I was wanting to talk. The other thing I was wanting to make sure we talked about, you went there, Ben, and that is, soil is important. So how do we get there? So let me give you an example. You talked about in your book, I think it's I don't think it's right in front of me, page 17, the Resilient Farm and Homestead. And you talk about reinvestment. So you talked about the pensions and social security and mortgages. And then you said, but nut trees beats an IRA hands down on a strictly monetary basis alone. So this is very interesting. And I'll tell you why. So, a couple things there. First, when I think of the way to wealth. So the way is living in the present moment. Two is the team. Wealth's an acronym of the things you need to think about in wealth management. When you think about investing, you think about financial DNA or investor DNA, or like, we're all unique. And my point is, and I say this, so first of all, for a business owner, your best investment, hands down, no questions asked, is in yourself. Your education, your learning, anything you can invest in yourself for your mindset, all these things, hands down, best investment. Second best investment is back in your business. You know it. You're in it for a reason. You got a skill set and a skill that and typically you're passionate about, that you're going to have control over, and that's going to be your best return on investment after yourself. Then third, figuring out what you are passionate about, what is unique for you. So some people love stocks, in the markets. Some people love real estate. Some love land. Well, this is an example. If someone's into like land or planting or trees, well, you could make a solid argument. To me, I'm just saying, determine what your DNA says you are. And for some, this is the answer. And the cool thing of this being the answer, so like within the last 3 years, we've planted over 500 nut trees, a lot of chestnuts and a variety. And you saw some of that. Yeah. It had nothing to do with investing. It just had to do with, being a good steward of this land. But then when I found out what actually this can return long-term, it's ridiculous. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that, because for some people, it may be like, I've never even thought about that as an opportunity, and it's going to do good for the soil and generations to come and the planet.
Yeah. I mean, tree planting, I can talk a lot about, because it's so near and dear to my heart. I mean, I like how you put it, that you planted trees just because, I mean, it sounded like you just were like, that's a good idea. I'm just going to plant trees in the ground. I know there's going to be some value. And then you realized, oh, like there's these values or this value. But a lot of the values you don't even know when you engage in something until you start realizing them. There's more than you might have understood in the beginning, especially when we partner with like living systems.
I just wanted to get it out of corn and beans, which is what the past owner did. So it was like, let's plant trees.
Yeah, it's great what you've done down in that bottom field and everywhere else. But yeah, I think there's a lot there. I mean, if everyone could just plant a few trees or shrubs, whatever it is, and live with those for a few years, I mean, most of those people would probably keep planting, because it's such an enjoyable and deeply satisfying, like resonant process to like watch these trees just grow. I mean, they grow every year. They just keep getting better. Whereas a lot of things, it's about, back to that negentropic situation, right? Like a lot of things, you build a building and it's the best it's going to be pretty much is when it's done immediately. And then it's always maintenance. It's always falling apart. The car's never better than when it has 5 miles driving off the lot. It's not going to be in better shape in 5 years. And trees, it's the opposite of abiotic technology. These living systems accrue value over time. You put a tiny little tree in the ground, and I'm climbing walnuts. I can climb 30 feet into these walnuts that I planted. They're almost 50 feet tall, 45, 50 feet tall off the side of my deck. I put them in the ground, less than 20 years ago. I've been eating off of them for 10 years. I mean, and they weren't even in a very good spot, and I didn't even know how to take care of them in the beginning. I mean, some trees you can get there in 10 years, and every year they just keep growing. And it sounds simple, but then when you participate in that process and you realize, wow, as you get older, and you come to realize, you're not going to be around here forever. You literally leave all these things in the landscape that are going to totally outlive you, and they're going to reproduce and make 100 new trees or 1,000 new trees, whatever it is, and just keep rippling through the world, even when you're long gone. I don't know what's much more compelling than that. That just seems like something that most people could really get into.
I love it. Yeah, well said. I'm into it. That resonates with me. And you, the way you put it, I don't think people think about it like that, and like you had put it, you even gave ROI examples of penciling this out or Excel spreadsheeting this out in the book. So people could check it out, get the book, Ben's book, The Resilient Farm and Homestead, and just page 17 to give an example. And to me, again, your unique DNA, if you're into that, if this is resonating with you, this is an option of a way that you can do well with wealth, meaning you're creating something that is going to be resilient and continue on. And I love how you put it. It grows every year. What other investment is like that, where you can say this thing's going to grow? Pending a lightning strike or something crazy, every single year, and produce every single year. And I think part of what's happened too, that helps with this, is a mindset of just really thinking long term. And here recently, last year, we put together a company called Legado Family, and this is about focusing on legacies for families. And what we put together, a partner of mine, Rich, has just been brilliant at what he's done with his family. He raised 5 boys with his wife, and wow, what a job. He put in rites of passage, because we've lost that now, and he set up rites of passages at certain ages, like the indigenous had. And to me, that was the messaging. So all of the work then ends up being what we call a family constitution. And I've named it 7th generation family constitution. So Angie and I have gotten very involved with a Native American chief and Native American friends here in Virginia, with indigenous culture for healing and just learning. And, some of their things like 7th generation thinking, man, that's what happens. So when we put together this family constitution for families, and I did the research on our constitution to realize we took a lot of our constitution from the Great Law of Peace, from the Iroquois Confederacy, this Native American tribe. And we left things out. And one of the main things, one was the role of women in leadership and government. And 2 was 7th generation thinking. And if we could get back to that, which is part of what I feel like I want to do, is how do we make the money clean? And then how do we, make the invisible visible? And this is part of it, is healing and this 7th generation thinking. How's this going to affect the 7th generation from now? And not just our family and not just other families, but the plant family, the animal family, water, soil, etc. And boy, that's such a healthier way to think about things. And it's really what you're talking about when you're talking about planting trees.
Yeah, all our relations, right, is how they often will put it. Even when we don't acknowledge them or see them, they are all of this is all our relations, and we are related to all of it, whether we are aware of it or not. And it's a lot more empowering and gratifying to be aware of it. I grew up in Iroquois country, in Western New York, and I think that may have, I don't know if that's part of, if I grew up somewhere else, if I would have been on the same path, but that was a very present thing, I think, in retrospect. It wasn't then, but we would spend summers in the hills, where the Seneca people have lived for 4,000 years. And they were inspirational for the founders of this country, for sure. And the women's rights National Hall of Fame is there because of they were inspired, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony and some others, all Rochester, New York. That was the seat of a lot of women's suffrage movement and women's rights revolutions. And that's, it's not a coincidence. It's in a place that had a really advanced matriarchal, I guess you'd say, versions of culture, for many thousands of years. It's really neat. There's another great person from that area, Robin Wall Kimmerer, whose work you'd like. If you haven't read Braiding Sweetgrass, you'd really like it. She's a professor at SUNY ESF in Syracuse, and she's from that area, and really just puts a timely message on a lot of these concepts.
It's It's really fascinating stuff. It feels like the time is right to continue this message. And yeah, I just want wanted to all my audience to hear about you, experience you, learn some of the wisdom that you have to share and you've learned along the way. And then if you're open to it, Ben, would love to do it again, run through again, because I feel like there's a lot more we could talk about.
Sure. Yeah.
And share. And what would you say? Well, one, anything you haven't said you would want to share with the audience, and then would certainly want you to share best way to meaning books or YouTube, or best way for people to learn more about you.
Well, there's so much. It's an endless process to be a beneficial participant in the world around you, through landscape, which is my focus. I mean, there's so many ways to beneficially participate in the world around you. Definitely not just in permaculture, but just being part of community, so many other things that I don't even know much about, but the landscape piece is kind of my shtick. But I think if for people to just start, and that's, I think, how my book ends on that note of just get going, get started. If it's just plant a little garlic patch or grow a few container plants, if you just have a little sunny balcony or deck, just any way you can get started with partnering with life processes beyond just human processes, and coming to know how other species work. It could be working with wildlife. It could just be growing some plants. Is a really easy way in. And once you start into it, the world does open to you there, and you realize, not everyone, that's not going to be everyone's thing, but so many people who would have not gone into that universe enter it with excitement and realize, it starts unfolding before them just by any starting action. The simplest stuff. It could be one little raised bed, or, you grow 10 potato plants, and the action of pulling out just some potatoes, even if it's enough for a week, does change a lot of people, and always for the better. never for the worse. So that opportunity is there to most of us.
I love it. What would be people interested, saying, hey, want to learn more about this guy?
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
The book is great, which you've mentioned now a couple times, so people have that name. I have some YouTube videos. I don't keep up with it a ton, but I have a YouTube channel that has a variety of things that people can check out. My TED Talk's probably a good way into this world for people who aren't that familiar. And then there's a lot of videos that are just more for people already geeking out on this stuff. And I try to put some stuff on my Instagram pretty regularly too. That's like a little more current.
Perfect. Thanks, man. I definitely, if you're open to it, want to have you back.
Sure.
To go even deeper on some of these topics, because I know, if nothing else, I'm curious to go to know more and have with it. So I'll thank everyone for joining the Way to Wealth podcast. We'll catch you back here next week with another episode, and we'll definitely have Mr. Ben Falk back on in the future to run this down even further. So see you all next week.
The opinions voiced in Way to Wealth with Scott Ford, Managing Director, Partner, and Wealth Advisor of Carson Wealth, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Way to Wealth are not affiliated with CWM LLC or Cetera Advisor Networks LLC. Legato Family is not affiliated with Cetera Advisor Networks LLC or CWM LLC. Carson Wealth, 19833 Leitersburg Pike, Suite 1, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.